Welcome back to Powerhouse Tactical. This is the part 2 of 3 episodes that I put together to help those of you out there that have been meaning to but have not yet begun preparing for the potential hardship that are getting more and more likely to happen as our nation goes into a deeper and stronger civil unrest. There are plenty of videos out there in the YouTube land, and I encourage you to watch a few more after this series. Things that you should prepare for will vary depending on the area of this country you live in. So I try to put this series together to help you start with the very little simple things that you can do right away, and also to convey the thought process behind what I'm recommending. More long-term preparation can follow after that if you feel the need in ways that fit your area and your personal and family needs. So let's get started. So in preparing for survival, knowing the rule of threes will help you prioritize and be more efficient. If you go more than 3 months without hope, you'll die. This is talking about the morale. As we've seen in many disaster survivors, their hope and their will to live were the very thing that helped them to survive. We even see this in war prisoners who are starved and tortured at times. Eating and drinking aren't the only things that's going to keep people alive. So next is, if you go more than 3 weeks without food, you'll die. Most human body will run out of necessary energy stored in their bodies after about 20 days and no longer function properly. There have been some exceptional cases where a person lasted much longer than that, but generally speaking, 3 weeks is what is considered as the maximum amount of time that is survivable without any nutrients. If you go more than 3 days without water, you'll die. Our bodies are made up of anywhere from 65 to 70% as water. With water, through urination and sweating, we rid of toxins that are built up in our body that are, the waste matter that are produced by our cells. Without water to wash our system out and get rid of those toxins, as well as provide that essential moisture for all the cells to function properly, for more than 3 days, our organs will begin to fail rapidly and lead to death quickly. If you go 3 hours without shelter, you can die. So if we're exposed to extreme environment for just a few hours, we can die. It does not take sub-zero temperature for someone to go into hypothermia. There's been many cases in our national parks and whatnot. Scores of people die every year due to exposure to environment. Even temperatures as high as in the 60s, if it is a rainy and kind of wet conditions, can cause serious hypothermia and eventually cause death. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke can also be quite deadly. And lastly, if you go 3 minutes without air, you die. Without clean, breathable air for more than a few minutes, providing the necessary oxygen to your brain will begin to shut down, followed by a rapid succession of, shutting down of rest of your vital organs in your body. So this rule of threes is the base of how you want to design and proceed with your prepping. So in the recent months, a serious level of civil unrest has been plaguing our nation. Rioters and looters are no longer burning and destroying just in the large cities anymore. As we've seen in the case of Kenosha, Wisconsin, a small town just across the border from Illinois, which is where I live, the mayhem has now spread to much smaller towns in all areas of the country. When you run out of supplies, are you sure that your local store will still be in business? Will the buildings of that store still be standing? Even if they're still standing, the problem still remains. In most cases, grocery stores get deliveries 3 to 4 times a week, with 2 of them being on Thursdays and Mondays to account for the weekend surge in sale. If the trucks are not able to reach the stores for just 1 week, the entire store will be empty. Rioters and the other thug groups are already starting to block streets and highways. Even ambulances aren't spared. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, has always posted on their website what things to have prepared, such as you need 3 days worth of water, 1 gallon per person per day. So if you have a family of 4, you need to have at least 12 gallons of water saved up, which in my opinion is way too little. That's not sufficient. And also 3 days of worth of food. Well, that also in our book isn't nearly enough. The prepping to many folks sounds quite hokey and funny at times, but if you think about it, our grandparents lived in ways that today's extreme preppers live their lives. It was only mid-1900s that people still canned their own food and long-term stored their food for winter in different ways to prepare for disasters and long, harsh winters. With the rise of convenience through technology, that we have become so spoiled to the point where people who prepare for the just in case are viewed as weird or extreme. Yet even our government has been asking its citizens to prepare for decades. With that said, let's get back to the rule of threes. So, rule of threes. We'll start with what is the most urgent and move up the list to the least urgent. Coincidentally, most urgent item happens to be the simplest to prepare. Air is obviously essential to our lives, but the air is all around us already. So it's not the supply of air that is necessary, it is the clean, breathable air. The condition of the air is what's under consideration here. So in order to prepare for some sort of enemy attack and with chemical and biological weapons, you need to look for some other videos on YouTube. This video isn't going to prepare you for that. But in case of civil unrest and situations where we are maybe without rule of law, the chances are you will need an effective protection from smoke and things like heavy dust. Maybe tear gas in the worst case scenario. For protection from smoke and heavy dust, something simple as a bandana can go a long way. Having a bandana in your prep will also provide multiple uses for other purposes. You can use it to pre-filter water, use it as a sling in first aid situations, wet it and put it around your neck to keep yourself cool, and so on. To have more effective filter for such particles as well as some viruses, an N95 level mask can be a great option. These were on extreme shortage for months on end in the beginning of the pandemic, but they have become more available and the price has now somewhat normalized. It will not hurt to have some of these masks for children and elderly especially who need more protection. These, however, will not provide protection against things like tear gas, however. In order to filter tear gas, you need a filter with activated charcoal in them to neutralize the gas. If this is something you feel that is necessary for you to prepare for, make sure that the filter can includes activated charcoal. With that said, aside from the full-blown gas mask with charcoal filters, preparing for air supply should be pretty easy, simple, and cost no more than a few dollars. I would begin preparing for this particular section by allocating about $20 to start, then add more after preparing for other elements in our list. So the second part of our simple and immediate prep item is shelter. So obviously, we're not talking about the home you live in, or even like a tent or something in the wilderness. Most likely you will be stuck at home, but we need to prepare for such cases where our gas or the power grid is down. So this part of the list, we will just make sure that our family isn't suffering unnecessarily if our heating or power goes out temporarily. Something as simple as having a wool blanket or two per person in your household can go a very long way. Wool blankets are great because they will keep you warm even when they're wet. They're naturally fire retardant and strong against molding as well. They can be somewhat rough in texture if it is 100% wool, but there are options out there that are 90% wool and 10% synthetic fabric, which will still provide much of the benefits of a 100% wool blanket, but they will be feeling a little softer and more comfortable. They're available pretty much everywhere, military surplus stores to eBay to, all over the place, online and offline. I would allocate about $100 for this to start, to have 4 to 6 blankets for the entire family stored away in your closet. Three hours without shelter. So next item is very, very important. Water is so essential and plentiful, but also can be quite dangerous if not treated properly and you're not careful. We could begin to prepare for water simply by having a couple of things. Just a store-bought water filtration system will do 90% of the job needed. Tap water today is just fine. You can drink them just straight out of the faucet. But after public works and our local government shuts down, or even temporarily it doesn't function properly, we need to begin filtering even tap water. If your water source is rain or groundwater, be sure to use some sort of fabric to pre-filter it. Like I mentioned with the bandana example, you can drape a bandana or a t-shirt over a bucket, and you can pour the water on top of it so that it'll pre-filter it, filtering out some of the larger particulates in the water before you use these store-bought filters, so that your store-bought filter will last longer. This will help not only for your filters to last longer, but it'll stop from blocking the filter so that water can go through efficiently. Many filters claim also that their filters will filter out like 99.999% of all things in the universe, and so on. While such filters like ceramic type are extremely valuable and much longer lasting than the store-bought kind, I personally would still boil the filtered water before consumption, just to be extra safe. Filtered water is probably good as is, but I'm not going to take any chances because if me or any member of my family gets sick from drinking even just slightly contaminated water in this type of disaster situation, there really will be no hospitals or medical care for us to access. I would allocate about $150 for water filtration and some safe and sturdy containers to start with. So It is a common practice for people to go out and buy just boxes and boxes and boxes of bottled water to prepare for such emergencies. While bottled water will provide immediate solution, but once you run out of bottled water, what will you do? Especially when it is known that a minimum amount of water needed is a gallon per person per day. Any realistic amount of boxes of bottled water you'll deplete that within less than a week time. So make sure when you boil water, you boil them in a rolling boil, not just steaming up and whatnot, but the actual rolling boil for a minimum of 5 minutes, but preferably up to 10 minutes to purify them, which brings us to a little bonus section in our video. So, fuel to boil water. Now that we mentioned boiling water, we need fuel to boil that. So there are many different types of methods for fuel. Propane and butane are quite popular and affordable. They're also portable as well. It isn't a bad idea to have a propane tank or two filled up and ready to be used when needed. Smaller camping stoves are also convenient to store and use, as well as being more portable. Having some alternate fuel source may be quite helpful. Something as simple as tea candles can come in handy. Solid fuel, little fuel tablets, and portable and foldable stove for outdoor survival and camping needs can easily be used for indoors. Having a multiple ways to start fires is essential. Have lighters and matches, as well as learn to use a ferris rod to create sparks and build fire. Takes a little practice, but it's definitely a extremely valuable skill to have. And in today's world, it's almost impossible to live without our essential electronics. Cell phones, tablets, and our laptops are very important for us to get news of what is happening outside of our homes and to pull up maps of the area and so on. Yeah, right? It wouldn't be a bad idea to have some solar energy options in your preparation. So now back to our essentials list. When you're preparing for your food supply, you need to consider a few things. The food needs to be easy to prepare. Complicated recipes that take a long time to prepare will use up more of your precious energy, as well as require more fuel to cook them. The fuel that you may not have too much of. Another thing to consider is nutrition. Many beginners will buy just a lot of one thing, like canned beans and dry rice. That is all fine. Rice and beans are a great option for prep food, but you still need to consider there are other things like protein, fat, and other minerals like sodium that are going to be required by your body. Whatever you can store, it is a good idea to add a couple of bottles of multivitamins and multiple containers of salt. And finally, many preppers make a mistake of storing good nutritional food that is cheap and easy to make, also a lot of it, but fail to consider one thing. What does your family actually enjoy eating? If you store all the good for you stuff, but no one likes to eat them, your survival will be unnecessarily miserable. Make sure the food you're preparing is something your family already enjoys eating on a regular basis. That way, even if no disasters come, you didn't waste your money on something you just wouldn't eat normally. Keep your food supply in a relatively cool and dry area of the house. When you buy more put them in the back of the row as you take from the front to consume. Make sure your cans are not dented or too rusty. Dented cans and also the cans that looks a little bloated and whatnot can be a good sign that your can has gone bad. If you end up consuming a food that's in a can that has gone bad, it could lead to botulism, which is a deadly toxin that sometimes can get created in canned foods. Eventually, learning how to can or dehydrating your own food can be a great idea for prepping, and also saves a lot of money on grocery bills. And if you have young children, it's actually a quite enjoyable activity to do with your family. There are many great options for protein for long-term storage. There's of course the ever so popular tuna option. Some people may be turned off by the idea of canned meat such as chicken or beef, but you actually try them, they are surprisingly delicious. For an example, my family particularly likes canned chicken. Canned chicken makes great chicken salad, even in non-disastrous times. Spam, of course, is another favorite for many people. Already has a lot of protein, as well as a very valuable sodium. In a normal time, spam can be considered as not so healthy because it's too heavy in sodium and fat and whatnot. But in a survival situation, those two things actually become crucial for your survival. Speaking of sodium, do not store low sodium canned foods for prepping food supply. Sodium keeps food longer, and you'll need that sodium as an essential part of your diet for survival. Canned beans and dry goods are cheap, nutritious, and quite filling. So many variety of different beans and corn, as well as low-cost fillers like rice will help your table to be more plentiful for less cost. Be careful, however, not to store brown rice for long-term purposes. While brown rice is more nutritious than white rice, they do not keep as long as white rice due to the natural oil in the outside of brown rice that can force brown rice to go bad quicker. So just cheap, regular, long grain rice, white rice would be my recommendation. Whatever nutrition that's missing in that white rice can easily be and more than made up by opening up a simple can of beans. Beans also provide much of the protein that you'll require for survival. Rice, beans, and some salt can sustain you for a good while, but it'll lack some fat, vitamins, and most of all, flavor. My personal favorite is canned tomatoes for that solution. Canned tomatoes are very affordable in large quantities. They also contain much of the vitamins that we need. But most of all, they provide a widely loved flavor. Just add a can of tomatoes to a pot of super boring rice and beans, maybe a can of chicken or beef if you can spare them, then voila, you have a gourmet dish. Try experimenting with some of the food items that you are planning on using as your prepper supply. There are so many economical options for shorter term survival that you do not have to start with super expensive, good for 30 years, freeze-dried beef and milk cans. For more variety and vitamin needs, don't forget to add some canned fruits to your storage. They will go a long way for morale of your family's survival. Speaking of morale, this brings us to the hope section of the human survival. The grid may be down. Even with solar panels, you are forced to only use your electronics sparingly. Go to garage sales, go on eBay, go to the local library for used book clearance. Get books to read like novels and historical nonfictions, but also don't forget about books on how-tos. How to fix a car, grow a garden, carpentry, plumbing, etc. I know you can find all these things on Google and YouTube in seconds these days, but if the power goes down, offline copies will be your only source for knowledge. Allocating $5 per week to spend on used books can go a long way. Also, have some board games to pass the time with the family. Card games are also a very good option. Video games may no longer be an option. Well, that pretty much covers the 5 essential threes of human survival, known as the rule of threes. Just to begin your preparation, you can do so by investing a small amount of $300 to $500. Once you've gotten the minimum of each category begun, you can then slowly build upon them. Try a few dishes with the food supply that you have. And once you find that niche dish that you like, get more of it. Try filtering some water with the bandana and the whatever filtration system that you prepared, and try boiling them. Have a couple of things of Tang in your storage. There's like Kool-Aid, Tang, and a bunch of different powdered flavors for your water. Tang would be my personal recommendation because of all the powdered water flavorings. Tang actually happens to provide 100% of your daily vitamin C requirements. And also, it's not a survival essential, but just imagine drinking just filtered water for the next, month and a half. Kind of providing some variety for your family with a couple scoops of Tang in a pitcher will go a long way in the morale portion of the threes. Even if you don't smoke or drink, having a carton of cigarettes or a few bottles of vodka or whiskey could actually go a long way if you need to trade with others. Salt is also an essential and a great trading tool. Remember, in the ancient times, salt was used as currency along with gold. Lastly, please don't feel overwhelmed with all of this. Even people who are expert preppers all began with 1 or 2 things. Start small, start cheap. Don't spend a lot of money from the start. Then build on top of that as you get familiarized with each and every item in your prepping storage. And of course, you can build as big and as quickly as you are willing. In the last installment, the part 3 of this series, I will discuss more on trading with neighbors, security, how to secure your home and personal security, as well as health emergencies such as first aid and whatnot. Thank you always for joining me at Powerhouse Tactical, and see you soon in part 3 of this series. Until then, stay safe, stay yellow, prepare, protect, and pray. I'm Daniel Lee at Powerhouse Tactical.